rubbished claims there are cases pending against her. Magudumana told the court yesterday how rapist and murderer Thabo Bester apparently forced her to flee with him from South Africa. The state is opposing bail, saying she will try to evade justice. The bail application is due to continue next week. Let's find out what happened today with our senior reporter Silindile Masikelo, who joins us, or Masikelo, sorry, who joins us from Bloemfontein. Slee, thanks so much for joining us. Talk to me about the crux of Magudumana's argument today.
Well, in essence, what we saw her legal team during those closing arguments that they presented to the court was really tearing apart the evidence that was brought by the state in opposition of her bail application. Now, what her advocate, Franz Dlamini, did was go through each of the allegations that have been made against her, the charges that she's facing, as well as saying that the state presented a poor case in the opposition of bail, saying that there was nothing that was brought by the state that in essence confirms the strength of the state's case against her, saying much of what the state had put to the court were issues that should be dealt with at trial stage. Now, for an example, you mentioned in your introduction that she is facing a number of fraud cases that were registered this year, amounting to millions of rands. Her lawyer saying that Magudumana has not been approached by the police regarding these fraud cases. Also stating that the phone calls that she's been making from prison have nothing to do with the case or the bail application, saying that the state was really trying to vilify Dr. Nandipha in its opposition of the bail application. Let's take a listen.
The nature of evidence upon which the state relies upon is of a very poor nature, is unsubstantiated, notwithstanding the fact that they make reference to so many people and the fact that they have even obtained their affidavits, but they never even attempted to file just one confirmatory affidavit, nothing whatsoever.
All right, and my apologies, I completely mangled your name, Silindile Masikelo. I know you so well. But let's continue now, focusing on the case. Talk to me about the issue around the scheduling of the bail application.
That was quite an interesting submission that was made today during those closing arguments, Sally, because before we started this bail application yesterday, you would remember that we began with the state and the defense confirming to the magistrate that this bail application is going to be heard as a Schedule 5 bail application. What that means is that the onus is on the applicant, Dr. Nandipha, to show the court that the interests of justice permit her release on bail. Now, what we saw her legal team then doing today was that they are now disputing that this is a Schedule 5 bail application. Dr. Nandipha is facing about 16 charges, many of which relate to the escape of Thabo Bester from the Mangaung Correctional Center. There are about 2 charges on that charge sheet which are Schedule 5 offences. Majority of the charges are Schedule 1 offences. What makes this a Schedule 5 bail application, according to the state, is the fraud and corruption charges against her, and that makes up 2 of the 16 charges against her. So they're saying that this then doesn't mean that this is a Schedule 5 bail application, but that it actually should be a Schedule 1 bail application. Let's take a listen.
If your worship looks at the charge sheet before you, there are 16 counts. Out of those 16 counts, what makes this matter to be a Schedule 5 looking into those charges is only count number 3 and count number 4. The rest of other counts, they don't turn this whole matter into a Schedule 5, because those are offences that ordinarily falls under a Schedule 1. The court knows the onus and the standard of proof if a bail applicant is facing a Schedule 5.
Slee, did the state present closing arguments today?
Not at all. We simply ran out of time. And in fact, we only started with closing arguments after 2 o'clock this afternoon. This second day of the bail application proceedings were actually supposed to start at around 11 a.m. However, Dr. Nandipha Magudumana's legal team wasn't actually ready to proceed, meaning that we had to wait, and we only started after lunchtime. And by the time we began, her legal team then took up the rest of the court time presenting those closing arguments. And so the state now needs time to also address that particular issue around the schedule of the bail application, saying that they were not anticipating that this was now in dispute, and so they're going to have to rework their heads of argument. And so we then had an agreement between the state and the defense to resume with proceedings on Monday, where the state is expected to present its closing arguments. But there's also an agreement between the state and the defense to have their heads of arguments exchanged by the 1st of September. Let's take a listen.
Not today. Not today. The court shall have noted that there are issues that unfortunately has now been raised, one of which is very crucial, and which is it relates to a schedule. I would not have anticipated that there will be such argument on a schedule after we have agreed, and the defense had indeed agreed that it is a Schedule 5. So whatever I have prepared so far would not have dealt with the issue of schedule of the schedule. Therefore, I need to work on my prepared heads of argument in that respect. And you are not here tomorrow. You are not here tomorrow. I do not mean that. I'm committing myself to the 1st of September.
All right, so Slee, yesterday we saw Dr. Nandipha Magudumana. She was in tears at some point. She was sort of vehemently shaking her head when she heard what the prosecutors had to say. What was her demeanor like today in court?
Her demeanor today, Sally, I must say, not as emotional, I think, as we saw yesterday, but she was quite reserved, more than she was in terms of displaying any types of emotion today. She once again came up from the holding cells when we began, where she sat in the dark, avoided eye contact, avoided making, any kind of expressions. She looked down for quite some time. At some point you could see her mumbling under her breath, and it looked as though she was praying. But for much of today, she was certainly very reserved, not really making eye contact with anyone.
All right. Thank you so much for bringing us up to speed from Bloemfontein. That's our senior reporter, Silindile Masikelo. Let's